Are we ready?
We are recording, Chief.
Okay, thank you. We'll call the joint board meeting to order of Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, Scioto Valley Fire and Rescue, and Western Lane Ambulance District. Would you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now you got me watching the camera to make sure it's not focused on me. Okay. Okay, Mary, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. SVFR directors, Director Mandolia. Director Heppel. Director Burns. Director Polisi.
Present.
Director Spade.
Here.
Western Lane Ambulance District Director, Director Russell.
Here.
Director Murphy. Director Holbrook. Director Buss. And Director Webb.
Here.
WLFEA directors, Director Webb.
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Polisi.
Here.
And Director Spade.
Here.
Okay, we have quorums for all three districts. Now we're open for public comment. Has anybody signed up, Dina?
No,
Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? No? No, okay. So now we have, we just went through a very difficult time or ordeal to get our local option levy passed. And it wouldn't have been possible unless everybody pitched in, and we had a lot of people help us out with that, and we're very grateful for that. However, we did have one director, Director Mike Webb, who was instrumental in making sure the levy renewal did pass. And we actually informed the Special District Association of Oregon of his activities, not only for the levy, but for everything else he does for our community, and they agreed with us. And so they developed a certificate of recognition for Director Mike Webb in recognition of his dedication and commitment to the Western Lane Ambulance District and the Florence community for over 16 years. Your contributions are greatly appreciated. So thank you, Mike. So consent agenda consisting of meeting minutes from October 28th, staff reports and correspondence. Does anybody like to pull anything out of the consent agenda? Hearing none, consent agenda will consist of those items. And we'll go to call volumes.
Thank you. So just highlighting from fiscal year to his end of October, EMS is 153 calls above average, 21 transfers above average, and 15 specialty care transports above average. And fire continues to be above average on all except for general service calls, 3 calls above average of regular fire calls. Rescue is 105 calls above average. I also included in the board packet the mobile crisis response for call volumes. And for this month, they did 31 calls. And it seems to be the theme, about 30 calls a month that they respond on. Any questions?
Thanks, Matt. Financials, Dina.
thanks, Chief. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope the Western Lane directors got the financial reports I emailed yesterday. They were late due to the board meeting being earlier this month, so the same thing will happen next month. I did some bank transfers last month for Western Lane because we were getting low in the general bank accounts. If you remember, we put 1.5 million in the local government investment pool, and I don't want to touch that if I don't have to. So these transfers were in the budget. One was bringing 120,000 over from LifeMed. Another was to bring 234,000 over from equipment reserve for capital outlay. And the last one was transferring 319,500 from equipment reserve to the general fund for future capital expenses. You can see these transfers in the financials on page 32 in onboard under other income. This gave us enough funds in the regular bank accounts to carry us over until tax revenue arrives, which is starting to come in now. I haven't done the transfers for Siuslaw Valley yet. I'll do those next month. Regarding expenses, 4 months into the fiscal year, we should be tracking between 33 and 34%. Overall, things are looking good to me. As always, some line items are high since we have to pay some things in full up front, and other line items are low. This is normal. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. If, or just an observation, if you could avoid the acronyms on the balance sheet statements when you're talking about a transfer and maybe have, or at least footnote, what those acronyms are for, because I got lost as to which fund you were transferring money from and to. Rather than previous, rather than the acronyms, and you know, a little bit confused.
So Director Webb, I'm not hearing you very well. Can you use the microphone?
Yeah, I can use a microphone, but it might point this out in the sky. But anyway, just letting you know that when I'm seeing on your balance sheet adjustments or the transfers, if you want from one account to the other, but you're abbreviating the account with maybe three letters, if you can at least put out what those letters are, because I'm getting lost as to what account is the source of where it's going.
Okay.
Just for my own information, and I know if I'm reading it that way, the public's going to get confused too.
Will do.
You got that, Dina?
Yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions on finances? We have no old business. Now we'll go into our new business, which we're going to have a presentation by the city. And everybody see that? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you out on this nasty evening. First, I'd like to congratulate you on your recent ballot measure that passed. I think that bears out the respect and admiration that our community has for both our fire and ambulance districts. So, yeah, my thanks for your service. We're going to talk this evening about a multi-unit property tax exemption, abbreviated as, for Mike, it's a MUPT, but I end up calling it a Muppet, so because it's a lot easier to remember. So fortunately, you won't have to listen to me for very long, but I just want to make a couple of points about this. I think that the city, everyone in each of the taxing authorities that make up this property tax exemption all see the need for housing, and especially market rate or affordable housing. You can call it whatever you want to. We all have a need for that. The schools, the hospital, medical personnel trying to move to our community, school teachers that cannot find a home, and therefore they can't come. So this is just a tool that we hope will help to spur some development of affordable housing. On the surface, it will appear that you're giving up some revenue, but in fact, you really aren't, because you continue to get the revenue from the value of the land as it sits now. What you're giving up is the revenue on the improvements over some period of time, be it 5 years, for example. But if you look at that, at the end of the day, if they don't build, you wouldn't have the revenue anyway. So it's sort of a win-win, and just gives the city and our economic development efforts another tool to help attract somebody that will build affordable housing. Fortunately, we've got two people here this evening that know a whole lot more about this than I do. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'll turn it over to Aaron Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mayor Henry, and I hope you can hear me okay. I'm going to stand here with a few notes because I do get to talk about numbers. That's why they bring me along. So I'm the city manager for the city of Florence. I've been doing this 6 years, and for 4 years previous to that, I was the finance director. And we're here to talk to you about MUPD, the multi-unit property tax exemption program. The mayor does really want to call it the Muppet, but we'll call it the MUPD. So thank you for having us this evening and building some time in your agenda. Thank you, Chief Schick. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And making the time for this consideration. How did we get here? Mayor Henry just talked a little bit about just the practical perspective of the need for housing that we're seeing really strongly now today. We actually started feeling this pinch about 6 or 7 years ago for that standard workforce housing. It was traditionally found, if you made a decent living, you had a good job, you could come to Florence and you had some inventory to choose from and buy a home about 6 or 7 years ago. And every year since then, for a wide variety of factors, it's gotten a little more and more difficult. And so in 2018, the city worked on a project called the Housing Economic Opportunities Project, and we called that the HEOP. And so I always imagined a little bunny bouncing around town as we talked about housing and economic opportunities. And through that HEOP, we worked on a very specific piece of work that all cities need to do, and it's called a housing needs analysis. So it's a very long range prescribed process that we went through, and the result of that process showed us that Florence needed about 1,600 housing units over the next 20 years. So of course, we're now in 2021. That was 3 years ago. And I will tell you, we have not even come close to chipping away at a pace that we would need to meet that 1,600 units for the city of Florence proper over 20 years. We are trending about 50 to 60 housing units a year right now. About every year, a triplex or a quad will get built. And certainly, I think you all know we haven't had an apartment complex built since 2007. It's about a 40-unit complex there tucked behind the Oregon State Police, or NOVA, I guess, or NOVA Healthcare. Of those 1,600 units, this study showed that we needed 600 multi-unit housing dwellings, units, whatever you want to call it. And I will say, I do want to let you know that there wasn't any crazy growth factored into these numbers. It was a less than 1% growth rate for the city of Florence over this 20-year period of time. So it was not even factoring in, and obviously no one knew the pandemic would ever happen and that we'd have even more people coming than we would have expected. So it was just a very modest, less than 1% growth rate. The recommendations out of that gave us quite a laundry list of things that we could work on as a city and also as a community. It wasn't just all policy decisions, it's things that take the community. And we've chipped away a lot of those things. We've done the housing code update. We've instituted a system development charge discount program, and we've brought in accessory dwelling units. They're approved and allowed, and we have some other programs. So this was next on the list. So the city council has put this in their work plan for this biennium. They've directed staff to work on this program. Planning Commission, by way of that direction, also picked it up and had it in their work plan. And we started off on that work. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Sarah. I'm going to introduce her. Sarah is our Senior Economic Development Analyst. She's been working for the city for a couple of years, moving up the ranks, and she was a part of the staff team to work on this, and she's going to share a little bit.
Hello. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what a MUPD is. So a MUPD has been around for about 30 years in the state of Oregon. It's a state-enabled program that incentivizes builders to build multi-unit properties. So Salem has had theirs since the mid-1980s. So this isn't something new. We're not the first community, and we really have relied on other communities in Oregon of many different sizes to frame out what we think ours should look like. A MUPD program or a MUPD allows properties to be exempted from the assessed value of new residential construction for up to 10 years. So the project continues to pay taxes on the land value and any commercial improvements to the property. So let's say someone builds a building on Bay Street that has 5 units above and it has commercial down below. They would pay taxes on the assessed value of the commercial as well as the land value, but they would get the exemption from just the property or just from the residential improvements. The intent of the MUPD program is to lower operating costs so projects become financially feasible. I think we all know how expensive things have gotten, especially in building in the last 18 to 20 months, but over the last couple of years, for sure, it has gotten really hard to build residential and expensive. So how did we get to where we are today? We worked with a group, MUPD ad hoc committee is what we called them. It was 5 members of Planning Commission as well as our Community and Economic Development Committee. Eric Hopman, Andrew Miller, and Phil Tarvin represented the Planning Commission, and then our Community and Economic Development Committee was represented by Russ Pearson and Dan Lofi. We worked together and met about every other week for about 3.5 months to look at other communities and really decide what our MUPD should look like. Just because the state enables it, they don't prescribe what a MUPD should look like. You can really put some boundaries on what yours looks like. The committee specifically did a deep dive into Cottage Grove's program and Newport and Lincoln County's program. They are about the similar community size as ours, as well as they were 2 pretty different programs and where they ended up. The ad hoc committee made a recommendation about what our Florence MUPD program would look like. And that recommendation is based pretty heavily on Cottage Grove's program. So what does ours look like, our recommendation? So there's a bunch of different project eligibility requirements. First, the project must be fiscally infeasible. The developer has the onus to provide that through a pro forma. In the code, it's in the proposed code, it is very well lined out with exactly what we would need from a developer to make that decision. It can't be on the back of a napkin being like, this is what I think. It has to be pretty in-depth. The property must be within a 1/4 mile of a fixed transit route. So not the stop itself, but the route. And for us, that is the Rhodey Express. The development must include at least 3 units, but it can go up to however many. And it cannot be used at any time for short-term rentals. We need rentals for people that work in our workforce and people that live here full-time. And this is specifically what this project is meant for. So no short-term rentals and no hotel or motel spaces. And currently this benefit is only for new construction. However, there is potential in the opportunity in the future to make changes to this. However, right now it is for new construction. So remodels don't count. Any kind of add-ons don't count. And then also projects would have to complete 3 or more of the public good benefits based on the unit count. So we created a pretty exhaustive list of what we consider public good benefits. These are all outlined. Did they get the memo in their packet? Stuff, right? I can go into depth of any of these if you have questions. However,
they did, but
that's okay. If you have questions about any of these, I'm happy to answer them. It didn't feel like a good use of time to go into depth, but these are all the things. They choose 3 or more depending on unit count. So 3 units would have to do 3 of them, 4 units would have to do 4, and 5 units would have to do 5 of them. 5 or more units would have to do 5 of them. A lot of these are required in our code. However, what we're looking for is above and beyond. So because our code requires open space, let's say, they can't say, yeah, of course, I'm going to do that because it's required in our code. We're looking for an above and beyond of the open space and other of these. So in the future, let's say, if the MUPD is approved by 51% of the taxing rate of our taxing districts and it goes into effect, how would you choose which projects get it? It's not automatic. You're building 4 units in the city of Florence, you wouldn't automatically get the MUPD. So development would have to have a pre-development meeting with city staff to make sure that their application is complete and worth the time of our city council. And then they would have a public hearing in front of our city council to make that decision. At that point, we would, before that goes in front of our city council, we would give ample warning to all of our taxing districts to make sure that they have time to comment on that application. If it seems like it's way outside of the bounds of reasonableness for either of your boards, you could have a chance to comment on that from the city or to the city of Florence. They would decide on that. And if they deemed the project worth a MUPD, the exemption would begin after the construction is completed. So they do need to be approved by city council before a shovel goes in the ground for the construction. However, it does need to be approved before then. So they can't decide halfway through their project, hey, I actually do want a MUPD. It needs to be decided way in advance of that construction. So I'm handing it back over to Aaron to talk about all the financial things.
Can I ask you a quick?
Yeah.
A multi-unit or establishment that's already established, is there any way if they're going to do construction on that property that they could qualify for multi?
Not at this time. So that's that wouldn't be considered new construction. That would be considered a remodel or an add-on. It is something that we could consider in the future, but currently what we're asking you for is just new construction only.
No. All right, so why are we here tonight? We're here tonight, as you saw in your packet, to ask for support. You're each two separate taxing districts. You participate in the tax rates of the city of Florence. So for homes in commercial businesses, any taxable property taxes in the city of Florence. Again, we're just talking about the city of Florence proper. So I also understand that you have taxing districts that cover much larger areas than just the city of Florence. So we're talking about those areas that are, it's tax rate code 09700 at the Lane County Tax Assessor's Office. It's for that tax rate. It's for the $13.63 that a person that lives in the city of Florence sees on their tax bill. So that's what we're talking about here tonight, is considering an exemption program for that set of taxes. So it would not impact anything outside of the city of Florence. As Sarah was just mentioning, one real strong focus of this program that we're presenting and proposing is focus on just new construction. So it does not take away from the existing tax base that you have today. So the land, it would remain taxed, and for the duration of the program, you would still receive your taxes on that land. What it does do is delay the collection on any of the new constructed values. And that's a specific term at the tax assessor's office. It's the value of the improvements. So when you get your tax bill, you see on it something that says land. That's the part that you'd still get your taxes on. And the piece that comes in as the improvement value is the piece that's exempted. So it's delayed gratification. It is for up to 10 years. Sarah just walked through, not everybody qualifies, but also once you qualify and you're approved, you are evaluated every year to ensure that you still meet the eligibility of this program. If not, then you are released from the program and you will start paying taxes. There are some cases in which they would go back and collect those back taxes as well for an egregious violation. Something that most people are very concerned about is the short-term rentals, ensuring that a program like this that's getting property tax exemption is truly for a long-term renter, not for somebody coming here to recreate and spend a short amount of time. So
when you say delay
10 years, so 10 years you won't get it,
Well,
and then you start.
it's not saving it up though.
No,
And we don't get it back at the end of
No.
10 years. So it's not, it just exempts.
delays when
Okay.
you start receiving it. It
Okay.
is truly exempted, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we could go to the next slide. Yeah.
Before you
Yeah.
back up to that slide.
Sure.
And one reason I asked the chief the question, he clarified it. Some people delay the receipts people I have talked to said at year 11 that we collected all.
No, I mean, that makes sense. It's a
So
good
some
point.
people, that's why we wanted it.
Semantic words matter. They really do. So thank you for asking the question. It's a good question. It is about not having to pay those taxes for the first 10 years, which are usually going to be the most critical time for more expensive multi-unit housing is very expensive, especially as you get into 2-story, 3-story, and all the regulations that come when you're mixing multiple families, shared walls, shared very close living quarters, in comparison to single family residences. And there's a lot of extra regulations, rightly so, right, Tony? There's extra fire regulations, and we support that, but it does come at a cost. Life is valuable. So anyways, we're here because Sayusa Valley Fire and Rescue does represent a part of the tax bill, as does Western Lane Ambulance. You can see here, Sayusa Valley Fire and Rescue makes up about 10.74% of a person's tax bill that you see. That is not your tax rate. Actually, have that on hand for the next part of the conversation. So that was another question somebody asked. Well, that's not our tax rate.
Yeah.
And then the Western Lane Ambulance District, and the thing that says LC should say WLAD levy. Those two combined together is 5.53%. What we are seeking to gain is, we'd love to have everyone's support, but according to the Oregon State statute, the city needs to be able to bring to the county and say, we have 51% of the tax rate covered and with support. So for us, the tax rate for the area is $13.63. I did round up. And so we need about 51% of that tax rate. We ideally love to go to the county commissioners, as that is a step in this process, showing that we have really solid support. For Sayusa Valley Fire and Rescue, here's some numbers. For every $1 million of assessed value, I just chose $1 million because it's easy to do math off of. Sayusa Valley Fire and Rescue would not receive on the new construction value about $1,500 a year. For Western Lane Ambulance, again, I combined both those rates. I realize the operating levy won't always be there, but for now it is. It's about $770 a year. So that's the magnitude of a per $1 million. Obviously, not every project's gonna just run on the tax rolls at a assessed value of $1 million, and some could be more. And then again, that's for 10 years. And add another 0 and know what you would lose for that $1 million for every 10 years for a project. So that's an order of magnitude, just to share. Obviously, the larger your percentage is on that screen, the more tax revenue you are exempted, you're giving an exemption for and not receiving. But everyone does share in that exemption. Every special levy, the bonds, et cetera, it all matters. So the city council in, I go to the slide. Yep, my timeline slide. Okay. So the city council is working on this as well, right? So they're doing this in parallel. We're a taxing rate as well. We do represent about 19.5% of the whole tax rate, along with urban renewal. And the city council will be having a public hearing and considering the ordinance for this starting on November 29th at 5:30 p.m. In parallel tracks, we're meeting with the special districts, and we met with the port, the library, and asking for their support. And then eventually, if the city council approves the program, we will proceed to Lane County commissioners for their consideration. They have to do two things. They would need to provide their support, and they are aware that this is coming to them for a decision because they are a tax rate as well. And I can't remember off the top of my head. They're about 9% of the tax rate. But they also need to just approve the program overall. They're the overseers, and they approve, like, you as a community are the program. They just recently did this with Cottage Grove in 2019, and here we are in 2021 asking, well, it'll be 2022 by the time we get there. If that gets approved, we're on a bit of a fast track for the 2022 construction year. We do have 2 projects that are in the wings seeking support or seeking a MUFTI program like this. As you heard, this is something that other communities in Oregon have. So when apartment developers come to the CFR, one of the first questions they ask is, do you have a MUFTI? We've told them no for years. Now we're finally being able to say, yes, it's being considered. So they are waiting. If somebody wants to do construction in 2022, they will have to apply in quick order, be considered by the city council in March, and they get approval and it'd be filed at the county by April 1st. Next slide, just to show you you're not alone. And some of you, thank you, have heard this presentation more than once. Thank you, Mike Webb, for your representation on urban renewal. Thank you, John Murphy, for your representation on Planning Commission. We appreciate your service. And thank you to all of you. I'm sorry, I don't even know you, Tim, Lori. It feels so odd. Thankfully, I've seen and known most of you. So thank you for your time. And I hope I have a chance to meet you in another way where I'm not asking you for something. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. And Sarah and I are here. And Mayor Henry's our follow-up act if we need anything else. So I'll turn it over to the chairs. I don't know how you guys.
I got a quick question. When this goes into effect, how long is the program going to be in place? Is there some type of date or?
Good question. Actually thought of another thing I meant to say, so I'll say that too. So Mike asked a great question. By state statute, it does sunset. This ability to even have a program like that sunsets by state law in 2032. If you actually look at the ORS right now, it will tell you it sunsets, I think, in January of next year, but they did pass the legislation and it will get updated. So it's 10 years that it will be allowed to be in effect. As long as this gets approved and the city council has it, it would stay in effect until there was a time where they didn't see it fit. If we did happen to have a lot of units built and it served its purpose, I could imagine the city council saying, let's put a pause on this. We're completely taking it away altogether. If there was any substantial changes to the program, we'd be coming back and asking for approval for the substantial changes to the MUFTI program, like remodels, something that would really take away from the existing tax base. We'd be coming back and recreating that program and starting all over. But just because it's over in that 2032, if approved, you have the program, you've received the exemption, you would still get up to 10 years as long as you apply, even if it's sunset at ORS level, you would still have the program. One thing I forgot to mention is, as we were talking about money, one thing we heard feedback from some of the other cities was fire departments specifically are actually one agency that would probably see an increase in service calls, an increase in level of demands by apartments or multi-unit, more people, more calls, and you're not charging charges for services technically like an ambulance can. I'm pointing to the wrong sides, but you get the point. For those on camera, right? I'm doing it right, I'm sure. So anyways, one thing I did talk to Chief Schick about, and he's done some research and he'll share with you from his perspective. A fire department can actually choose to set a fee schedule, and you could still, this would not exempt you from charging for calls for service. And you can create a program, you can create fees, etc., that you could work on. So that was one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about money.
I will say too on that is apartments aren't built overnight, right? So just because the program starts in February 1st of 2022 doesn't mean that on the 2nd we're going to have all these new apartment buildings. So that is a decision that you don't have to make, and you can really consider and make, a good decision on that. And these apartments aren't going to be occupied for, a while if they are approved. So
we'll be lucky to see apartments in 2023. Anyways, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, so the state has a guidelines what you can charge. So for a typical, say we had a fire there, so an engine, an aerial apparatus, command officer, it would probably come up to like $500 an hour. that we could, and this is what South Lane Fire and Rescue does in Cottage Grove. Now, are we sure the ambulance couldn't do that?
I don't know. I'd have to let you, I hadn't had anyone say anything.
Yeah, well, South Lane, they're combined, so
Okay.
we're sort of separate, but we would propose it as well for Western Lane Ambulance District that. So a typical EMS call would probably be anywhere from $50 to $100 an hour that we could charge. And most calls are less than an hour, but so we would attempt to, or we could, if the boards wanted to do that, we could put into a fee schedule in place as well. So you have two resolutions. Each side has two resolutions. One's without the fee schedule, and that was suggested by the city originally. And then talking to them, we came up with this idea that we might be able to put a fee schedule in. So you have two different resolutions if you want to consider either one.
I have a question for that. You keep saying up to 10 years. What determines it? Sam gets it for 5 years and I get it for 10 years.
So you would be approved for 10 years, but every year you get reevaluated. So if you do
it's 10
something
years,
that,
it's not up to.
yeah, sorry. So yes, it is a 10-year program. If you qualify every year at every evaluation, you would have a 10-year exemption.
The fees, this just be directed specifically at the monthly.
It'd be the owner of the complex, so.
Okay, so it wouldn't be the tenants of the complex would be responsible for the fees.
Correct. I believe so, yeah.
I would imagine so. So another thing about this that we've had a few Q&A sessions on this. So a really commonly asked question is this for properties that are for sale? No, this is for a project, one project. It can't be a big, large phase project. It needs to be something that's intended to be rentals or long-term rentals. And with one owner, obviously it could be a conglomerate or something, but with one property owner that pays one property tax bill. And it would be the same thing for I would imagine for your fees for service, it's going to be for the property.
Just a comment, as you heard him on the planning commission, and a lot of people think if this is passed by the city, we're immediately going to get a big booming building. That's not going to happen that quick because of in 18, like they said, we needed 1,600 new dwellings. That was in November of 18. I think we done that study. Being on the planning commission, I would believe right now from what has been built and with 3 Mile Prairie and the pipeline and the 2 new apartments over there by Pacific Pines, we're still down around 1,300 dwellings we need. And we needed 300 and we have 338 acres of available building land. Our 20-year plan needs 231, but we're also running low on land sizes that we can put large projects on. So before long, we're going to be down to single family dwellings and duplexes. So odds are you're not going to lose a lot of revenue in the first 5 years.
So Director Burns couldn't be here tonight, but he did submit a letter. He asked us to read it. Dina was going to read that.
To the both Board of Directors, I'm sorry I am unable to attend the board meeting this evening. I would like to comment on the proposed 10-year property tax exemption. This community has had several times industries that have tried to locate in Florence, but because of high system development fees and rules and guidelines our city has placed on businesses, they have turned away. I have seen several issues of businesses that have come to a community with promises and after a few years have not followed through. It is hard to list all of my concerns, but if I were to vote, it would be no. Too much can be lost for everyone. Director Alan Burns.
Other comments?
Right. So the project and the properties we find out in complexes, Does the city already have areas earmarked where they want these things to fit? It's complexes to fit.
Good question. We've got a planning commissioner in the weeds here.
We have some approved projects going now, but we never know, and with, you know, Oregon land rights, we can't, if you come to the planning commission, we say, no, we're not gonna approve your property request, you need to put it on this piece of property. We never know what's gonna come before us, and we don't recommend people build something somewhere they don't want to. It's all upon request, and each one's looked at individually.
That's a really good answer from a very practical standpoint. So nice answer. I'll give you a city official answer. So no, we do not say what has to go where. But in general terms, we have a long-range plan. It's the comprehensive plan. And in it, we have a zoning map. So we have maps that look like this with big blocks of like coloring of what type of things can go where. It's not specific to a business, but it's about types of things. So for apartment complexes, they are allowed to go in high density zoned areas. What was just being mentioned, there's not a lot left. There really is not a lot of areas left in the Florence area. And even more specifically, getting lesser and lesser within that quarter-mile route of the transit route, a quarter-mile of the fixed transit route, the Rhodey Express, that would be available for even an apartment complex to be considered. And that's 5 or more units. The triplexes and quads, there's an ability for those to go in places that are zoned medium density. And then the low density areas are pretty much single family dwellings. You would have ADUs in there, but no, which are accessory dwelling units or mother-in-law cottages, but not that. So yes and no, there's like a map, there's a puzzle to us all of what makes sense to go where.
I'll also say, I was just talking to a developer about a housing plan a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him, like, how much land do you need for 80 to 100 units? And he said about 5 acres. And there's not a lot, I mean, there's 3 or 4 in the city that are of that size that are within, you know, that would allow that. So really there isn't, the idea of these like major apartment complexes coming in is unrealistic for the majority of our housing stock.
I'm a developer.
Yeah.
In Florence.
Oh.
I had no idea where any of this would exist.
Not give you more color.
Not within the proper boundaries.
Well, and it would be really difficult to do that outside without sewer
Yeah.
service or reliable water service.
That's, I guess, would be my biggest
Yeah.
question is, this is a
It
sounds like
tool.
a huge shortage.
Yep.
We have a grand plan, but as a guy who has boots on the ground.
Right. So that's with our housing code update, and we can always talk offline. Love to talk to you. It's really going to be bite-sized pieces for Florence, and that's always how we've solved our problems. We come together and we tackle the challenges one thing at a time. What we're trying to do is incentivize, so somebody who is maybe thinking about a duplex does a triplex, or a triplex, and they say, you know what, I could do 6 units. So, I mean, that's what we're hoping for.
That's what happened in Cottage Grove. We've had 2 separate properties that were supposed to be just duplexes, and then upped their projects to quads, adding 4 more units to the property because of the monthly. So, I mean, there is the opportunity for that. And that is the missing middle is what we call it, right? Is like there's single family homes on one side of the spectrum, and then there's massive apartment complexes on the middle. And what we as a city have been missing in our development is everything in the middle: townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, quads, and all those things.
So I won't say this is going to solve a problem completely. It's really a tool to add to the city's toolbox to be considered, and hopefully this, along with other things that the developer may have, or another city tool or a state or federal thing, that they can put a project together that ends up making sense. Right now, the market on its own, for the most part, has answered. And that is what makes financial sense, is to build nice custom homes. And we just are really all starting to feel the pinch for why we don't have that. And I really don't want to keep taking no time.
That's okay. We got another, Director Polisi, you got a question?
Yes, good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me well.
You're
Two
good.
questions for the city manager. Does the clock start ticking on this when the certificate of occupancy is granted for natural use? And number two, say a developer comes in and he or she gets approval for it, and I don't know, halfway through, they sell the property. Does it transfer to the new owner, or does the new owner have to reapply?
It would transfer to the new owner. It does stay with the property, and they'd have to remain eligible for the thing. The clock would not start over with the new owner. It would continue for up to the 10 years total.
Okay,
And Sarah will answer your other question.
Yes, it does start with the certificate of occupancy. So with taxing, you get a, what's called construction in progress, and you get
Right.
that during the time of construction. And then the 10 years does start after you get a certificate of occupancy.
thank you.
Yes, John.
And also, Jim, if somebody comes before the planning commission and we approve their project, they have 1 year from that date to start the project, or they have to reapply again. So then if that goes away, they'd have to reapply with all this through the city.
Got it. Thank you.
So handy to have you here, John.
So your options are to adopt the resolutions, either one with the fee or without the fee, or we can push it off to the December board meeting and get you more information if you need more information. Entirely up to the directors.
You're eating this.
Maybe you can.
Or you can decide not to support it. That's your other option.
I would like West Plains standpoint, I think it would be appropriate to move for the fee approach. Knowing how difficult it is to financially justify this kind of project in Florence is a big deal. There are getting access to properties for workforce housing. If we see what the EMTs over here, where you're gonna live. And get something that's affordable, prices are out of line. Everything gets down the left and purchased for overnight rentals. To name a few. So anything we can do to help inspire this kind of development would be helpful for workforce housing.
So you're-
I would make a motion to do the fee.
Okay, Mike Webb makes a motion to adopt the resolution with the fee for Western Lane Ambulance District. Is there a second? Second by John Murphy. So further discussion. I have a question. So is it has to be affordable housing or?
It's not affordable, capital A, affordable housing. It is for rental housing. One of the guidelines, or one of the parts of the ordinance or for this program will be, in order to qualify, you have to demonstrate and be financially infeasible without this MUPD program in place. One of the public goods that are required for the program that somebody could hang their hat on would be the affordable housing element. And we do anticipate that people would use that element more often than not.
Are we in the discussion phase?
We are discussion.
We, at the planning commission level, multiple people come and testify before us how we are going to take care of the affordable housing issue. We cannot define affordable housing even here because affordable housing is based on your amount of income, your expenses, what you can afford to pay. So affordable is out there and we don't know how to obtain a solid figure for that.
Okay. Director Polisi, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I did. I just had one other question for the city staff. Does this include below market rate housing initiatives or not?
It absolutely could. And we do anticipate that it would. It doesn't preclude anyone. So it can be for regular market rate. It could be, as John was just mentioning, affordable means a lot of things to a lot of
Right.
people. But there are standards set by HUD and that you can look at a federal level for your county and see that. And there, I could imagine that happening. There are two projects in the wings right now that both would say that they are truly affordable housing projects, not defined by the city, but as defined by the federal government through the HUD.
Thank you.
Any further discussion for Western Lane Ambulance District? So Mary, could you do a roll call vote? This is to approve the resolution to support MUPT in instituting fee-based or response-based fees.
Yes. Director Russell. Director Murphy. Director Holbrook.
Yes.
Director Buss. Director Webb.
Yes.
Did you hear all those, Mary?
Yes. Director Buss was a yes.
Yes. Yes, she was.
Okay, yes.
So, yeah, so we have to speak up a little bit and use the microphones if you'd like. So SVFR, any questions or? So we're looking for either a motion to adopt one of the resolutions or to deny.
Move that South Valley Fire and Rescue support the city of Florence in the monthly program with the levy.
With the fee-based resolution or just the plain resolution? Fee-based, yes. So Sam Spade made a motion to adopt the resolution with the fees for SVFR. Is there a second?
Second.
Tim
Director,
Polisi, second. Mary, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes. Director Mandolia.
Yes.
Director Heppel.
Is there a discussion real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we should add a discussion.
Fire with leaves. What does that mean?
That if we respond to, it could be a medical call, it could be a fire call, using Oregon State Fire Marshal's conflag reimbursement rates. Typically, fire does not go on lift assist, but if we were called out there, then it would be based on the vehicles that go out there. Correct.
So they would charge from the ambulance and the fire.
Yes.
We'll just, if we have all our employees in the field, we'll just figure out how we're gonna split that. Let's down the road, figure out a game plan.
Absolutely could do that. Yeah. So it's typically, it's based on just your vehicles and who's on the vehicles. So if we had an ambulance and an engine, then yeah, we would charge for both of those.
And so I understand price growth is combined. How do they do it? Is it, so theirs is ambulance and fire with one single fee? Or is it split?
They're based on the same reimbursement schedule, so I assumed they would charge, they're not charging by type of call, they're charging by apparatus.
So another way of putting it through the Oregon State Fire Marshal Mobile Plan is that the firefighters pay $18-something an hour, apparatus is $100 an hour, medicine is $50 an hour. Bundle that all up in the package, that would be what we charge the public for now. So if it's like a 4-hour event and a very large structure fire incident there, that all that price would be added up and they'll be submitted that way. But for both of them too, in that sense, if it's a medical call, it's $25 for an ambulance, $50 for an ambulance, or $20 for the crew. That'll kind of explain that.
So lift assist could be a couple $100 if a large person and we need lots of people there, lots of vehicles. Tim.
So we already have a facility that's under the same model right now. In this fee model.
In Cottage Grove.
Cottage Grove. So they said that it would be the property owner's responsibility to use that true for Cottage Grove as well.
Correct.
Okay, so the point of this is to entice developers to build by making the project financially feasible.
Or the reimbursement, so you're talking,
Well, I'm just thinking through the whole,
Yeah.
what we're trying to accomplish, or what they're trying to accomplish. you know, and then if, as a property owner, if you have this random unknown variable that you're responsible for, and if you build enough units, now you have a huge liability, which I get also decide to cover the cost of everything that's happening. I'll support it. But I don't know how this is helping the situation. I don't know, like we're like attaching this unknown cost variable to a project that we're asking for this huge number, but at the same time, we need to be responsible for this thing that you can't account for. Because you can't account.
So I don't think we'd recoup the amount in property tax that we would lose in a year. Potentially on a large structure fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Their numbers per million weren't that high. And then the numbers that were just mentioned in my mind, I'm like, wow, it's that per hour. And the numbers per million were that low.
Yes, for a typical medical call, I could see it being $100, $200.
I think it's one thing. I'll support it. I just like, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You may want to say it's only for if it actually happens, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
we're gonna hope no fires.
Well, fires more than.
Yes.
We're covering all human life, which is, you know, you're asking us to put in a bunch of human life into a complex and then support that human life. Okay, cool.
Well, I will also say, our building code and environment has changed dramatically since we've had apartments being built, and so they are probably more safer to be built today, because we'll have sprinkler systems and then all these different things that are now required that weren't 15 years ago.
They will have sprinklers. That's a definite. That's. Sprinklers. Okay, so we had already started the vote. You were yes, or you're still yes? Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Did you get that, Mary? Lori was yes with fees?
Okay, so.
And
Director,
that's what we're voting on.
yes, Director Polisi
Yes.
and Director Spade.
Yes.
Okay, it passes. So we will need, Lori needs to sign the resolution as well as Director Burns. We can get your signature tonight. And then Cindy and who needs to sign for Western Lane?
Chief, I've got both resolutions down here. I'll run them up shortly. I did,
We'll get
since
signatures, too.
Director Burns is not present, I put Director Heppel and Director Spade for signatures, and Director Russell and Director Holbrook on Western Lane.
Okay. That'll work. Okay. Thanks to our guests from the city. Excellent presentation.
Where are you going?
Oh, sorry. People do this to us all the time. Nice to return the favor.
Okay. So this is, that's all the new business. So now it's an opportunity for directors to comment on topics not on the agenda. Director Polisi.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I want to respond to a letter from RJ Pilcher dated August 26, 2021. It was item 9B, and the title was, "It's Not Too Late." I was unable to attend the last meeting, and I wanted my response to him written or read and entered into the record, but it did not occur. So I want to address it tonight. And this is my letter to President Burns and my fellow SVFR Board of Directors. I wish to have my response aforementioned subject read and entered into the record. My reply is based solely on my thoughts and does not speak for the rest of the SVFR Board of Directors. While I respect written comments and encourage community communication, I will not accept the attack that the SVFR Board of Directors are a quote rubber stamp for Chief Schick. This enhancement of pay is because the person or persons have attained a higher level of emergency paramedicine for all served by the members of the SVFR. It is no different than when a police officer exceeds their basic training of 26-week academy and trains to become a SWAT officer or other specialized capabilities. For the fire service, when a firefighter exceeds their basic job skills and becomes a member of a hazardous materials team or urban search and rescue, the employee is rewarded for increasing their professional abilities. This enhanced salary adjustment is not an entire new MOU, but an amendment or side letter to the current MOU. There is no hurry, as Mr. Pilcher states, and he is correct. We are two separate emergency services districts looking for what's best for the community and the outstanding services performed by the men and women sworn to protect and serve. Should the district start the process in the years to come to become one single taxing district, job descriptions will change to fold all personnel into specific operational duties and assignments. As for Chief Schick being on the labor negotiations, he can handle this task. The amount of public funds that were exhausted in previous negotiations should have been saved for when a legal team is truly needed. Chief Schick will have to vet the contents of the next contract negotiations with the board of directors. Chief Schick has always communicated with the board members on issues revolving the district and its staff. Enough of the attacks against public safety and the members of the districts. I, for one, want the best emergency services from the bottom to the top for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Polisi. Other directors?
Just a comment, you're thinking, as growth is going to happen, as we hope, with this MUPT, I would like to see us build a 10-year plan. We'll put it in our strategic plan or separate, that as we get so many more people in Florence, we anticipate this many more calls. At one point, are we going to need more firefighters and more EMTs and more equipment? It would be nice if we can kind of guess for the next 10 years so we can start putting money aside.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely, those numbers are available. You look at number of calls, usually 1,500 calls per ambulance. So we're getting really close to where we need 3 ambulances.
So it would be nice, have it out 10 years if we could. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to thank Director Polisi for his comments. I was looking forward to having him in the meeting. And glad they're in now, because I agree with him wholeheartedly. They're tired of the attacks on us.
Don't know that we can hear, everybody can hear. You might want to, there you go.
I want to thank Director Polisi for his comments, and I agree with him that I'm tired of the attacks that we endured through this election period and prior to it. And I also want to thank Director Webb for, and congratulate him on getting the certificate. But he was spearheading a lot of it. I stood behind him for some of it, and beside him, and he's quite a go-getter, and he's the reason I think this board is so well run, is because he has such a history, and he was able to answer all questions that were presented in the town halls. Those who attended town halls, they were very interesting, and also a little disappointing. I was hoping to see more public out of them. But as we go forward, I hope to get ourselves and the public back.
Other directors, Director Webb?
Yeah, a couple things. I am putting my name in the hat again for urban renewal for the next term, but if anybody really wants to do it in the district, don't let that scare you away. I'm more than happy to resign with you. And then secondly, as we go forward, this time around, we were caught without having our message out in the community, so we need to be really forthright and letting people know what we do and why we do it, and get the public involved. So, well, before we go out and ask them to do anything for us.
Director Murphy.
just about forgot to thank the fire side and the EMS side for showing up for our Columbus Drive Trick or Treat.
Absolutely. And Director, we've got a social media plan, ties in with Director Spades. He liked to see a newsletter, which I think is a good idea. So, yeah, I think we'll have a 5-year head start on the next one. Director Mandoli. Really get it close.
I just want to say that I also agree with Director Lucy's statements. I haven't been in Florence very long, only about 3 years. But I've come from a small town and lived where services are nothing like old factor. It's phenomenal. It's been just really great to see this response, and the way it's conducted is really outstanding. I think where Florence is on the precipice of being something great. I think there's a lot of growing pains here. There's, the chicken and the egg problem. I know we don't have enough doctors. We're preparing very soon, not maybe enough response personnel. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough, labor. There's a ton of shortage. So it's really impressive to see what you guys have done. And I'm happy to be part of this.
Thank you. No other comments? Okay, future business. We have a strategic plan steering committee meeting. And that's a subset of the directors. First meeting is November 23rd. Second meeting is December 9th. And then there's our next regular joint board meeting is December 16th. And we do have an executive session tonight. Following adjournment, the SVFR and Western Lane Board of Directors will meet in executive session per ORS 192.660 to paragraph D to conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media and audience members are asked to leave the room. No final decisions will be made during the executive session. The board does not plan to return to open session tonight. And with that, meeting's adjourned. I'd almost be okay with him staying.